That's right. It's Thursday night. It is the night where the ladies come to watch three grown men discuss 40k. I mean, what more could
Who
they
else is
want?
going to come? Who else is
Well,
going to come and watch it? You know,
three hunks, 40k content. Can't
Yeah,
get better than
three hunks in their bunks. Because that's what I meant to do. Turn off the Skype video. There we go. Just from me. Right. So I remembered. Hello, welcome to the show. I'm your host Rob, and my other two co-hosts Nick and Nick and Tom, not Nick and James, are here. I've got to fix that while we do things. Are here to say hi. How are you both?
I'm okay. I've been inside. Well, I've been inside. I've not been out of the house the last couple of days just because I've been a bit lazy. But I went out today, and the highlight of my trip out was I saw the most amazing tree. Honestly,
Okay.
it was incredible.
What?
I'll put a picture of it in the Discord for everyone to see. It was literally the biggest tree I've ever seen in my life, and it was amazing. And it was a highlight of my day.
Where was said tree?
It's in Woollerton Park,
Okay. All right. Well,
behind
that's
the golf course. If anyone knows it,
what, the tree or the area?
the tree. There's a golf course in Woollerton Park, and it's sort of round the back.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Well, that's really exciting. I keep leaving the house, and it's quite nice here in England at the minute. And whenever I leave the house, I'm just like, oh, how beautiful is the outside? The outside place is
The
wondrous.
outside world is pretty good, isn't it?
The outside world is wondrous, so I can understand that. I keep being amazed by buildings at the moment. I'm like, oh, that building's actually quite pretty, and I don't know what that is. So I guess this is what like people who don't venture out much, and I don't mean from their homes, I mean from their local area, feel like when they go somewhere. They're like, oh wow. Tom, have you seen any particularly delectable trees?
nah. Every time I go outside, mate, it tries to kill me. So I feel like I should stop doing that. The closest I've been to outside is playing badminton in my back garden with a bin and a deck chair.
Really different lives.
Is that a high enough net?
No, so we just stick a rope and tie it to one end of the bin and one end of the deck chair. We have a broom that sits in the middle and just pokes it up a little bit more.
Nice.
And it's just, thing to be doing.
We're talking about someone who is living on a different end of the spectrum. The Hobby Hobo says it's 6:30 a.m. here. The only reason
We're talking
I'm
about
awake is
spectrums?
because,
What?
more on you later, Tom. The only reason I'm awake is because I got so fucking drunk last night. Now my horrendous hangover woke me up 2 hours ago. Somebody killed me. I think that's also something a lot of people are doing in isolation. Is just getting hammered on their own, just like really discovering themselves.
It is true.
I want to say a big shout out to Saflux, like the chat, Full Greamer, Dydrin. I see. Apparently there is a seal in the Thames, and that blew his mind. I don't know if you mean
Has
seal
anyone
the
plugged it
animal.
yet?
Well, I don't know if you mean seal the animal, seal the singer, or a Navy SEAL. So I'm going to wait for some clarity on that. Also, big shout out to my man Wolf Priest Kajal in the chat. Will never stop his howling. Yeah. Oh, Brad Glover says I haven't left my flat in 2 months. I've forgotten what the outside land looks like. Go and find yourself a lovely tree, Brad.
I mean, that's got nothing to do with the lockdown and more to do with his Iden left town.
Don't worry, Brad. I will bring the outside to you. I'm posting it in the Discord.
Yeah, Nicholas will bring you his trunk.
Picture of a tree. Would you? Do you think the reason Brad won't leave his house is because he's like every Tau player ever? He just sits where he is, doesn't move
Doesn't
unless he
move.
has to.
I mean, he is now. Yeah, we've got him.
Well, if you are listening to the podcast, just like that seal in the Thames, please stay hydrated. And thank you to everyone on the Small Gamer Patreon. Couldn't do it without you. Literally, you guys have got the biggest dick energy on the planet. So well done for being you. Hello, K-Dread. So Flukes like said, I made an excuse to go for a long drive today. I don't know what playing golf will do, but you're just gonna have you're
Is that allowed?
you what? Golf?
Is that even allowed?
I think you can play
Or
golf.
was he
Have a
like
long
on
drive.
his was he on his roof just like?
Depends. Are you a fancy man who lives on a golf course?
Me?
Yeah.
No, Fluxy. I think he was
Is
just.
he
doing
a fancy man? Well, I mean, Scotland is basically just one big golf course, to be honest. Let's be honest. So he's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, and fight clubs.
I think that's just Glasgow, mate.
Oh, well, after we just lost all of our Scottish listeners.
Well, are you
welcome-
implying all Scottish people live in Glasgow?
No, not at all.
There's other nice
Not at all.
places in Scotland.
Don't they all,
They're
don't
not
they all live
you
in
know.
the Hebrides?
There you go.
There
I
we
know
go.
for a fact Fluxy doesn't live in Glasgow.
No, I know that. That's true. Brad Glover says, I actually plan on moving with my towel. Thank you very much. We'll see about that. And then Fluke Salot says there is actually 14 golf courses within 10 miles of me.
He told you.
Jeez. Well, today's show, I'm going to find out how Nick and Tom are after this. Today's show is going to be one of our editorials, which is quite exciting. It reminds me of the editorial that we did when we first came up with some keywords, which eventually ended up going in the workbook that's on the Honest Wargaming website. So I'm very excited about having this conversation that we're going to have later, which is going to be about how we review units, because it's been
And
a sticking
lists.
And lists, because it's been a sticking point for us three before in private conversations off air. So we're going to have the public conversation with you guys and try and come up with what we think is, I think, an interesting way of reviewing things. So we'll see, I guess. But before we do that, Tom, how have you been? Tell me what's
I'm
been
pretty
going on.
tilted, mate.
Okay, how
I've
come?
been playing a lot of League of Legends, and in those games, I've had AFKs in 70% of them, and in some of the others, I've had people running it down mid lane with items that they don't use. It's been fantastic, mate. I've had a lovely day. How have you done?
So it's kind of like all of the orc population, the orc army players are now playing League
I
of
mean,
Legends.
I feel like all the people who are actually orcs in real life are all playing, League of Legends in gold, and that explains why they're not very smart.
It's fine with me. As an orc player, fuck you. And I'm very happy with it. Nick, apart from seeing a tree, have you done any 40k this week?
I've not done any. Well, no, I did a little bit of 40k. So me and James of James Workshop played a tabletop simulator game of a League of Knights format. So Knights only using alternating activations, because I'm running a online TTS tournament on the 17th for some of the dudes from the League of Knights WhatsApp. So we were just sort of practicing that because I'm hoping to play in that as well. I'm basically the spare player, so if there's an odd number of players, I won't play. But if there's even, I'll play. So we just had a practice game for that, and to try out and set up the board and stuff like that. That was pretty fun.
That's cool.
So that's 40k I've done.
Oh, well, that's rad. Tom, have you done any 40k? Thought any 40k?
Nope.
But we have seen some. We have seen some. That's not true, because we've seen some news, right? Come out this week. We've
Oh,
started
right,
to
yeah,
see,
I had a look at the AdMech stuff, didn't I?
Yeah, we started. Well, we started to look at the some news this week from 40k is that the AdMech elements. They've started to release some AdMech stuff, basically, which is genuinely quite exciting. So we've seen some flying guys with flamers. We've seen some Robo-Dog horsemen. So we could be in for a very exciting time. I think the release schedule is basically back on track with Games Workshop website reopening. So we could be in for some new releases. The finale of the Psychic Awakening could be happening. And we might be due a new Mechanicum. Is it going to be a Mechanicum Psychic Awakening, do you think, or a Mechanicum
It is
Codex?
So it's Mechanicus Psychic Awakening. It's in Engine War, which is for, I believe, Knights, Chaos Knights, and for the Adeptus Mechanicus. And in there, you're going to be getting a bunch of new weapons for your cyber robot horseman people. And then you're also going to be getting some of those new flyers. And the thing I found interesting, specifically in the new flyers section, was that there are 3 different new flyers and 3 ways of assembling that flyer kit, which means that you can get 9 flyers on the board.
Ooh.
So, yeah, here we go.
I hope they
Mech
don't
Da
turn
Vinci
into a
Wing.
flyer spam army.
Mech Da Vinci Wing coming in hot. There you go.
Yeah, I think. Plus there will be Chaos Demons in the Engine War. Retta Santi, nice to see you. Hope you're well. Dude, our day. It's not back on track. Some things that Games Workshop had in progress have been moved back or even postponed. That makes sense.
Yeah, I wonder what that was.
9th edition, I assume, would be the case. Do you know what? The internet's been crappy again, which is so funny because I had Jonathan on the show earlier for an hour where we did nothing, where we talked about just bollocks for an hour. Internet
sounds
fine.
like a great show.
Now, when I really want to have the conversation I want to have today, crappy internet. Yeah. Anyway. Right, yeah, really annoying. Long as I can get non oil, that soy sauce isn't working as well, says Wolf Priest Kajal. Well, I think what we're going to see is a slowed down release schedule, like Dude Our Day saying, and we'll have some things. We'll probably have things moved around other than what was planned. which seems fine. Again, I'm expecting some 9th edition stuff to happen soon-ish, but it's not, so whatever. Okay, that's all the news, unless you two have seen any other news that's come out this week.
Not seen any news.
The only other news that, so the one piece of news that we saw is both BCP and Down Under Pairings have joined forces.
It's not really news, though, is it?
No, it's not news to us. But
well,
it's
we announced it on our show like months ago, right?
Yeah, but it's exciting for those guys. Exciting that there might be some stuff, some automated stats and things. I mean, that's the thing.
It was also exciting when we announced it on our show.
It was exciting all the time. Yeah.
I know.
All right. Well, okay. Well, so then there's no other news. That's it. There's no news at the moment, which is good because. But I'm excited to play some 40k. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I keep re-looking at as I keep picking up different Tzeentch Demon models. I keep looking them up in 40k and then realizing how incredibly shit they are, and then being quite sad about it, which is.
I think the one thing that I've tried, I do like in the Tzeentch book is the Lord of Change with the Impossible Robe, which gives him a 3+ invulnerable save, and you can reroll one dice. I think over the course of the game, but then if you roll a 1, you die. So it makes him quite resilient. Obviously, a 3+ invulnerable save is quite good. You can deep strike him in, so he's not on the table until you want him to be on the table. And then that free reroll that you get, that you probably ought to save until he's almost about to die. But then you've got your CP rerolls to reroll any. The only thing that does him in is something with lots of shots. But I've tried that a couple of times, and I think it's okay. It's not amazing, but it's decent.
So, much like a Wave Serpent, can he lift up his Impossible Robe and expose himself to do more wounds to the enemy at the cost of his invulnerable save?
Sadly, you can't, but that would be an amazing tool to have.
Oh, but it's not there, and it would be cool if it was there. But it's not.
Well, they've missed a trick there, haven't they? Much
they
like
really
the
have.
Death Watch fan fiction account, like Codex, it definitely wasn't uber busted.
Right. Okay. Let's talk Turkey. Right. Let's talk Turkey. Let's get into the if they've got no news, let's prep. I've just turned the Discord panel off, so you guys can't see it. I'm sorry about that.
But I posted my tree there.
I know, just in an effort to try and
Get
see
your trunk off the street,
that levels out the net. To be honest, there's something that's like pure like feed hungry, and I don't know what it is. Anyway,
I mean, Discord's very RAM hungry, but I don't know if it's very net hungry.
Yeah, I know. There's something. It's triggering me. Anyway,
as is Chrome.
Let's get. Well, yeah, it's okay. That's closed. So we're going to talk. The main subject of today's show for you guys listening at home, you guys listening live, and if you are listening live, I'd love your input. Me, Tom, and Nick would love your input because there's always really creative stuff said in the chat here. Would either of you two like to talk about the problem that we're trying to solve first, or?
I can give you my 2 cents. So part of this conversation came about from last week when I did my rundown on the Lord Discordant. So before, when we've been doing rundowns, we've kind of gone, right, we're going to pick a unit, do a rundown on that, and the rundown consisted of looking at the narrative, the model, and then all of the rules and all of the things that you can do with that one model and explore it in depth. Now, when I was doing my rundown last week, Chaos is a very, very superable faction, and there's lots of different rules. And obviously now, 8th edition, there's a lot of rules bloat, there's a lot of campaign books and extra rules. So I had to sift through an awful lot of information to gather every rule that you can do and apply to a Lord Discordant to buff it or whatever, and then try and wrestle it into out of my brain into a concept that I could kind of present as the rundown and on the show. And I kind of felt drained by that process. And my analogy for it that I said again last night was I felt like a fisherman throwing a big net in the sea and catching all of the fish and then picking out the fish that I wanted. Whereas I think we need to be a bit more targeted with the information that we gather and our rundowns. So then that kind of prompted us to have a conversation of, how could we change a rundown, or how best do we talk about either units in particular or a list as a whole with units in it that have certain roles. So that kind of brought us on to this topic for today's show.
Yeah, I think one of the I think your analogy is really good. Like when you want to talk about a unit and how to use a unit in 40k, you throw that fish out to that net out to drag all the information in, which is those fish. Really, what we want to do when we do a rundown is present it as like a piece of well-tailored sushi. Just the choicest cuts presented really nicely. But
with all the right condiments.
Yeah, exactly. But one of the challenging parts of that is doing something that maybe is uniquely for 40k, or maybe it's not, because it is a very interesting beast when it comes to talking about units. Like when you talk about Orc Boys, for example, which was thank you, straight in there. But when you do talk about Orc Boys, then you've got their base data sheet, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then you've got sub-factions they can go in, and there's correlation between that and Age of Sigmar. But then where it really starts to change shape is when you have stratagems, and that changes like the role sometimes of a unit inside of an army, and also really what like its key elements are. So it's finding out how best, because we've struggled with this for a while, I think, sometimes doing the rundowns, and I don't want them to change. I love talking about the narrative and I love talking about the model, but it's how we present the rule information, I think, is something that we could do better, specifically because one of the things that we've done over the past 6 months, and we were going to do in the next 6 months, is we were going to go to a lot of tournaments doing 40k coverage, and because of that, I felt like, and we've talked about this, I feel like there's a better way to present information. It's quite hard because we're all really amateurs. We all play a game in an amateur way. Like, no matter what, like, or we could all be very good at gaming, all three of us, or individually some of us, or whatever the case may be. And I'm talking about the people listening and you guys right now at home. I've read this Twitch chat. It's throwing me out. Sorry.
I've got a thing just to add to that, though, because you were talking about how it gets deeper when you add things like stratagems. It also gets deeper when you start adding things like different win conditions. So, for example, where you have lots of different events that have kind of very similar win conditions within 40k, you have lots of different rules packs that all have their own win conditions. For example, in GW missions, all of the missions are effectively based around whoever controls most of a board for the most amount of time. So therefore, you all have a big scrum in the middle, and whoever wins that scrum tends to win the game, right? Then you have other deeper packs like Worlds, which has a very, very deep pack. But also then when you get to things like team events like Worlds, your win condition might not always be to just win the game. Your win condition might be to lose by as little as possible. And that's when different units start to like take on different roles, as well as obviously you've got the stratagems as well. There's so many different caveats to how you may want to use a unit to match different scenarios compared to other games.
Yeah, but problematically, like, and we talked about this a bit yesterday because we did prep for this show quite a bit. And we talked about the problem when you review a unit and then you just go, it can do everything, is then it can do nothing, or you're not really we're not really giving any information to the audience, which is what I think our job is, right? Yeah. Like, what I would like to do is
a term that I like for that. Sorry,
no, you go.
I was going to say a term I like for that Rambo Squirrel put in the chat, the Infinity Dojo. So like you just said, if we just talk about every rule that a unit could possibly do, it can do that, it can do this, it can do that. So in that vacuum, it can do anything. So unless we define the environment or situation that it's in a bit more, then we can we're giving a lot of information, but it might not necessarily be targeted or useful information.
Yes, exactly.
What's it best at? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we talked about this, and also one of the things that happens a lot when we do live coverage, and both of you can attest to this, is while it's true you could just know every rule and every unit and how it works in the game, when you're doing the commentary, really explaining. If you watch any top coverage, if you watch League coverage or Dota or fucking poker or something, the guys are really, what they're doing is they're identifying the key points of what things like the big swing moments inside of a game are going to be, like especially choices, and at unit choice when you write your army list, that's really what we're reviewing here, like why are you choosing something. So I think rather than talking about a unit just in its own vacuum, we really should talk about a unit in the qualities a unit has when you add in the extra elements that you can give to a unit, i.e. buffs, for instance, stratagems and whatnot. and then how you would use those for different roles inside different army lists, which is what we talked about. That's one of the things that we'd like to do. So that's the kind of like grand narrative of what we'd like to do, because sometimes there's too much information, right?
Yeah, like an example of like how we might change the Lord Discordant rundown that I did last week. Last week I talked a load of rules about it, but like one role could have been, it's like in a Red Corsairs one where they could run a charge and you're shooting it across the board like a missile, or the other role is you're tanking and not dying for your possess bomb. So that's the same unit but two different roles. So we could have explored more each individual role in more depth and just had that more concise information on those different roles, rather than just here's everything.
Yes, I think so. So that's the premise, I think, of what we're going to do today. We're going to go through that as like a conversation. We had that conversation a little bit last night, but we're going to talk to you guys about it and see what you guys have got to say as well. Hermanista says, for NFL fans, Tony Romo is like that with his commentary. Okay, it helps he was an NFL quarterback, but his knowledge and foresight of what he would do make it great listening, which I think also is something that we could do as a group, right? Especially if between us three, we develop a common language of how we would talk about these things, and then when we go and do coverage, we do the same thing. Also, when we do review shows and we talk about stuff, those terms are common between all of us, so it's a language. I don't want to do X-Wing. I don't know if you've ever watched X-Wing coverage where it's just fucking jargon that I don't understand. They're like, he's a dive bomber. So I'm all for like simple terms that people can understand, because I think the very best version of what we could do when we review a unit is give like your happy-go-lucky player at the local store some kind of keywords that you can just be like, I really want like a defensive objective holding unit. It's like, sweet, there you go. You know, your brain jumps to Terminators, but maybe it isn't Terminators. Maybe for some weird reason it's Electro Priests.
Or boys.
Yeah, or boys. So like, anyway, that's the kind of bit which I think is.
Yeah, I do like the idea of developing. Like, I mean, there is like within 40k and AOS and Warhammer and other games, there is like common language. But I think from a commentator and watching it, or like just in general talking about the game, I think it is useful to have that kind of language. And like the example that I thought of today, like I'd like to develop some common language to like describe a list. So if you're starting a live coverage of a game, you can go, oh, here's list A versus list B. List A is this type of list. List B is this type of list. And like an example of like that I thought today was like football. Like when they start a commentary match of a football game, they'll say, Man U are playing 4-4-2, Liverpool are playing 4-3-3. And then instantly, as a fan, you kind of know what those formations are, and it gives you an idea of like two different play styles and how they might play against each other.
Yeah,
so I guess it's kind of this similar thing.
Yeah, exactly the same thing. Playstyles is also a thing as well. We actually do so much work when we do coverage, front loading. And some of that to you guys listening at home might not be particularly relevant. You'll be like, I don't give a shit what you do. Like, but to us it's really relevant, because so you guys are getting to see behind that curtain. You might not care, you might care, but for us it's like a really serious thing. But you guys at home might be super interested in it as well. Like we had the wonderful Henry Steele on earlier from Court of Paint, earlier on in the week, who was talking about brushes and how global climate change might affect like brush quality. And I was like, and he's like, but you won't care about that. Like that's just nerdy brush talk. And I was like, I want to know all about that.
Specifically what you want. Yeah, specifically what you want, because you have the expertise in there. And you just given me a point that I hadn't even thought about. Yeah.
Dulade says you can have great insight, but then you get a game like the South Coast GT final I commentated for on the other channel where the
Wait, was that the Alex game?
No, it wasn't. It was the Alex game. No, it was the Alex game,
buddy.
but the important part was the terrible Joe play is what it really was. That's what you missed out on. He just I drew a lot. I drew a lot of lines on the board, and I was like, the only thing that's bad, this one red line. The only thing you could do wrong, this one red line. Fucking followed it like.
So is it kind of like me with the Wave Serpent in Game 3 of the Wales event?
Yes, exactly like that.
Okay. Oh, he gets in your head, does that guy?
Yeah, so Rambo Squirrel says, also understanding how a force is made up is important, as even if X unit is the best in the game, if you spam them, it might be a crap force, so we need to do every battlefield role and every scenario. Rambo Squirrel, also an excellent judge of gaming. I think he'd be an excellent person to have this conversation with as well, so I'm glad he's in the chat. And K-Dread says, I can describe my lists. Shit. So this might be a 3-step process.
Could be one.
Yeah, this might be a 3-step process that we talked about last night. Today, we are going to be talking about some of the words or some of the terminology that we're going to create, and then we're going to post it up on the Honest Wargaming blog. And then next week, we might be talking about team compositions and list compositions, and Tom's going to walk us through some of that as someone who's been to a lot of international team tournaments. Nick's been to some as well. So we'll have that conversation. We might be able to even get a guest on. That might be quite fun. And we talk through that process, and then to round it off, we might just talk about the whole Gestalt conversation and see what comes up. I think that seems good. So the first thing to talk about is that we need to create keywords for different roles that you would expect to have units perform. So you've got different lists, which we've covered quite well on the Honest Wargamer site before, and I don't think that they generally tend to move around from, and you can go and see those keywords on the Honest Wargamer site, but the actual roles of units is a little bit more diverse, and I think some of them obviously bridge 2 roles. Things like Imperial Knights don't really count. Like, how do you review an Imperial Knight? It's tough to say it's got 6 only wounds. It's really good.
You run at people, don't play like a bitch, you need to run at people. Come on.
Yeah, it's really good. End of conversation. Like, cool. But when it gets to like the minutiae of other units, I think I'm going to kick us off. I think if you're talking about damage output, there really is only so I think a unit is a unit is a damage output unit, like a damage dealer. You know, that's a pretty common term, right?
But there's like sub roles of that though, like anti-tank, anti-infantry, maybe even anti-character.
Yes, I guess so. I guess really is the question: are they a damage dealer, or are they like specific? The problem is lots of things bridge that. That's what, like, when you get into specificity, you unfortunately end up like creating a quagmire of knowledge. So an autocannon is a good example, because they're pretty good against. It depends what you define vehicle though. Is vehicle only toughness 8, or is vehicle? Oh.
Well, I don't know, like anything with a
clap
keyword,
time,
right?
everyone.
Oh, clap time.
Someone's got a xylophone out today.
Yeah. Tom, what do you think about that?
What about whether a vehicle is only toughness 8?
Yeah, and everything else I just said.
Sorry, I was very distracted by the xylophone. It's been going on for a while.
That seems fine. So,
Sorry,
we're talking about units being damage dealers, right? Yeah, Nick's assertion is that actually a damage dealing unit is dealing damage to infantry, or it's dealing damage to vehicles. But really, like, the problem is if we get into so is it anti-vehicle or is it anti-tank? And then when it's something that's in between, like an autocannon,
or a Grey Knight Stormbolter.
Yeah. So what are you? But we need to come up with an answer. The answer can't just be we don't know. So, which is what this process is meant to be. So, what do you think?
Well, I don't know if I'd like to specifically categorize things into like specifically damage dealers, because the point of doing damage is to control board space, right? So the point of every unit you have is to control as much space of the board as possible. Sometimes you can do that to infantry. Sometimes you can do that to vehicles. I'm trying to work out how
I don't think it's always to control board space.
Okay, so what other use is there?
Well, sometimes it's to mitigate damage coming in.
An example I can think, example I can think of. Let's say back in the day when you had the Castellan just sat at the back of the board behind a million guardsmen.
Yep.
And you want a unit to kill that Castellan because it's going to kill all of your army.
Yep. And why does the Castellan want to kill your army?
But Tom,
because it wants to shoot you off the table.
Yeah, I know. So if you're killing the enemy army can't kill you back, which means you're then free to just push out your army, which means that you are controlling board space.
Yeah, but Tom, that's a circular conversation, because then all we're actually ever going to do is write on every unit controls board space and then just end the conversation.
No, I get that. So then before you're asking, how is it going to control the board space? And that's when you can get to the killer unit thing.
Yes, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not disputing the point. I'm just coming at it from a different angle.
Yeah. What is that you've got going on? Who's got the?
They've put the xylophone away and we've got a trumpet now.
There's just one guy in my area who keeps playing Things Are Only Gonna Get Better every week, but at this stage I'm finding it really ironic because things have got no better. In fact, actually, based on stats and numbers for the COVID, things have got perceptibly worse over the past several weeks. So I don't know if he's just like a zeitgeist kind of like ironic genius.
Have you seen that clip where Trump goes into like some factory and the song that comes on is "Live and Let Die"?
With no mask, he goes into a mask factory, a factory for masks, and doesn't wear mask.
He's coming in to buy his mask, mate. That's
okay. Anyway,
what he's doing.
Anyway, let's circle back. So Damage Dealer is my opening gambit.
Yeah,
and I agree. Everything
by clearing. So I normally like to call these like clearer units because they're specifically there to clear things out of the way, right? Which is like very, very basic, but then you can come down to what you're clearing, which comes down to the like melee, the vehicle damage dealer versus the bloody.
But isn't that as easy as saying? Isn't that as easy as saying anti-tank, anti-infantry?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you can do that as a specific, right? So, for example, like let's say you've got a Havoc unit with 4 las cannon. I mean, it can kill infantry, but you wouldn't. Therefore, it's probably like specifically anti-tank. And then you've got, obviously, specific infantry clearers like Swooping Hawks, and then, as I alluded to earlier, the Grey Knights with the Stormballers, they can be either, because you've got access to a stratagem that allows to reroll to wound against a certain vehicle.
Yes. Yeah. So, Nick, where are you at with that? Sorry, my song really pumped up volume then.
No worries. Yeah, I personally think we do need to define what, because like Tom said, certain units do specialize. So I don't think damage dealer is enough.
Yeah, everything's technically a damage dealer, right?
Because also damage dealer, you could be ranged or combat.
Well, so that was going to be my next thing. I would have I think you just add ranged, and you probably say you probably actually qualify that as well. Short range, medium range, long range, are always important. That have to be added in, or melee, right? Or short range and melee. I think melee is actually different to short range because as much as they seem very similar, actually those 8-inch flamers that you find on the Genestealer Colts are actually specifically short range and potent, but they aren't in melee, which is fairly an important distinction, I think. So you think you should put anti-type, anti-vehicle, or anti-tough 8? What are you really talking about? Because that's my question.
You could have
where
anti-vehicle or anti. Because there's infantry, guardsmen, guardians, or Primaris Marines, who are kind of, I would still put in that category, even though they've got 2 wounds. And then there's kind of stuff like Ogrins or Custodes. I wouldn't necessarily put a Custode in the same category as an infantry, because you wouldn't take loads of Stormbolters would be anti-infantry against guardsmen, but not anti-custody infantry. Then maybe there needs to be a different category for that, and because they're not vehicles either.
So just to clarify this, are we classifying
an elite unit?
Are we classifying things as anti-tank if you take a unit specifically to kill tanks?
So yeah,
Because,
I think
yes.
See, I think Scott B's saying in the chat, and that's the point. The idea of reviewing the unit is what you would like. So when we talk about a unit, we would already be talking about it as being either role A or role B. Role A, sorry, or role B. And you've put it in my list. I've put my I put my Wasbon Blasterjet in my list to fly and snipe out characters. That's his job. So he's an anti-character sniper.
He's a character hunter.
Is a character hunter. That's his job.
Hunter.
Yeah. The secondary role is that he gives a 5-up kind of invulnerable save. Yeah. But and that's what I'm trying to clarify, that not only do I think we need to clarify what words we're using, but what roles there actually are, because a lot of people don't. Well, I'm not saying that a lot of people don't. The good example is the Dark Eldar flyer that's a psyker with the flamers. is
That's the Hemlock Wraithfighter. That's
the Hemlock
Craft.
Wraithfighter. The Hemlock Wraithfighter is just taken because it's just fucking great. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's very efficient. Yeah.
But you can use it to hunt characters really well, or just use it to like burn whatever the fuck you want. Or
sorry, mate. I just wanted to very quickly cycle back to the anti-tank thing because personally, I really don't like ever putting lists in my units in my list specifically to kill a thing, right? And the reason for that is, well, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't matter what my list design philosophy is. Someone else might do that. And therefore, if we're covering a game where someone has decided that they need to put something in my list to kill a vehicle, then we need to be able to talk about that. It doesn't matter whether or not I think that's a good idea, because my list design philosophy isn't going to be the same as everybody else's. And that doesn't mean that I think that all list design philosophies are equal. Obviously, I don't. I think there are better ways to design a list. But the fact that someone might turn up with that idea, that's how they build a list, is something you need to be prepared for with your terminology.
yeah, absolutely. But it's also something we're talking about today on the show.
Oh no, that's what I'm just qualifying it.
I really like what
I'm saying it's not an endorsement of taking anti-vehicle units specifically from me. It's not an endorsement.
Rambo Squirrel makes a really good point in the chat. Tanks don't exist though. Remove the name and it could be a really tough character. So I think actually anti-tough 8 actually makes more sense. Hello, Irish Minotaur.
Anti-large?
Anti-large is good. I like that. We can steal that and we can apply it cross-platform. I like
You know
that.
where I got that from? Total
Age
War.
of Sigma. Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Anti-large. Anti-large, anti-small. Wow.
I'm always anti-small.
I'm not sure. It doesn't have the right ring to it.
do you really want to be anti-small? But it also means
Pokey John's comment is from Red Alert Command and Conquer.
Actually, Pokey John, light, medium, heavy.
Quite like that. Yeah, I like that actually.
Yeah, that sounds more. Yeah, large and small
that's
isn't.
better.
That's really good. That's really good. Anti-large.
Going in the spreadsheet.
Because then medium can apply. So like that really answers
Intercessors.
it's autocannons. Autocannons are an anti-medium unit. They have a variance between being able to deal with light and being able to deal with heavy.
Yes, yeah, sure. But it's then a case of, well, is a rhino now medium or is it heavy? I would say a rhino is heavy because let's put at one end you have light, which are like Gretchen, and then at the other end you have heavy, which are knights.
Yeah.
Well, then what fits within the medium? I would say something like a rhino fits more towards the knight end because it's very high on the toughness scale. It doesn't necessarily matter about the wounds; it's about the toughness and what your wound roll is.
I think the toughness is the key part.
Intercessors fit in light because they're much higher toughness, they've got more wounds, and they have access to a DPR.
Yeah, I would describe intercessors as being medium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just so we qualify that statement.
Yeah. Whereas a Horde of Orc Boys is light. So really, I think what we're generally talking about armor. Because custodies are,
and
I would say,
and
toughness. Custodies would be medium, right? They fit an interesting place in medium, but they're they're heavy medium.
Of course, there's a spectrum there, 100% there's a spectrum.
That's cool. Well done, everyone. We've started to do something. We started to do something.
Through the power of the hive mind.
By the way, if anyone is enjoying this conversational process and is coming up with stuff and wants to send us anything, obviously you can send it to the Honest Wargamer Twitter. We'd obviously love to have this conversation. And if you come up with something particularly great, I'll just have you on the show and we'll just talk it out, which will be fun. To 5 is medium. Just do something like T1 to 4 light. But I guess the problem is...
there are obviously some exceptions, though, with access to invulnerable saves and things like that.
Yeah, like, I guess. It's like...
I don't think we need to get bogged down specifically in what we're going to categorize each unit as, because I feel like that's kind of more self-explanatory, and then we can get into security later, so long as we have the overriding terminology.
I'd agree. And then I guess the good thing also about saying heavy, medium, and light is you're also talking about ranges. Would you define it as because ranges in 40k are probably one of the most important things? If I think about mech guns and I think about the Smasher gun versus the custom mega cannon, the custom mega cannon is 36 inches, but I really can tell the difference between the Smasher guns and the custom mega cannons. That 36-inch range versus 48-inch range doesn't sound like loads. It's only an extra 36 inches already sound like lots. But actually, 48 inches means you pretty much can't backboard stuff if I don't want you to. So, like, I wonder what you guys consider to be actual long range in a game where they've stupidly got 100-inch weapons. I think long range starts 48 inches plus, and then medium is 18 to 48. What do you
So
guys think?
I can go on this one when Nicholas has a think. I think there's two categories of long range because at a certain point your range becomes kind of redundant depending upon the board that you're playing on. Because we were talking about this yesterday, right? Where I was talking about like different board types and why that's so important, specifically with how I design my armies. So let's say I've got a 48-inch range gun. I've got a custom mega. I've got a smasher gun. Okay, I've got a smasher gun on a platform. That smasher gun moves 3 inches, and therefore you need to set up firing lanes which you can fire down. But there's still ways to work around it based on massive line of sight blocking L's and bits of terrain. So that is a long-range weapon, but its effectiveness is kind of neutered to a degree. Not fully, obviously. It's still a very, very efficient weapon, but neutered to a degree because of how the board is set up. The converse example is a long-range weapon like a Thunderfire Cannon or a Basilisk, where you have that long range, but you also have access to completely ignore that terrain.
Yes, because it's indirect. Like, but
It's
then
an indirect fire
but then
weapon,
it's as simple
yeah.
as saying direct, indirect, long range, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think the idea that something is because I know for a fact conversations we've had before. Also, Tom, just gonna bring up a conversation we had. Fuck, maybe 2 years ago, we talked about.
I'm worried now.
Yeah, because
What did I say?
it's only just fucking clicked in my head. Nick, I don't know if you remember this conversation. We talked about the oh my god, the dreadnought from Forge World, the heaviest one.
Brayoff Ashmantle.
No. Just the non-name, the every Iron Hands list ever.
Leviathan.
Thank you, Leviathan Dreadnought. We
Straight
talked
on
about it. You're like, no one's ever going to take it, Rob. 24-inch guns, bullshit. Yeah, like it will never survive. Like, but this was 2 years ago, before a whole bunch
Before
of
you
updates.
had something like, DPR and all of the stratagems that allow you to keep it alive. It's
couldn't
almost
have-
like that was the tipping point.
Yeah, it was, but
It's almost like my point was correct.
I couldn't agree with you more. Just saying.
I know.
I'm like Nosferatu of 40k.
Yeah.
Where I'm trying to get at is I think 24-inch range for me personally feels like short range. It feels quite like a dangerous range to be in.
It's a range that, but I think it's a range that you can avoid as long as that unit doesn't have massive movement. So are we talking, because some units might have a short gun range. Like an example I can think of is the Harlequin bikes with the haywire shots. Like they're
You
only
just-
range 24, but their movement's massive.
Surely you just do high mobility, low mobility.
Another example is Tau Commanders as well.
Yeah,
That's
but
another fantasy.
again, high mobility, low mobility.
Again,
I think that's the easiest way to describe it. I don't think there's a medium mobility. You just lump them in either one. They're either because in stuff in 40k, Shining Spears as an example, is bollock fast or it's just slow.
I feel kind of. So Dark Reapers, where do they fit? Because
I just
they
wanna say
have
big-
a 6-inch movement.
Can I just say big up to my legend Keith Baggett over on Patreon, just becoming a $10 Patreon member.
What a baller!
Yes, Keith.
Oh my
Absolute
god.
baller.
I don't know how he gets up in the morning with those massive balls, but I think he just anyway.
I do think there's a slight. There is a slight. It's weird. So I'm hiding in a ruin, right? And if my opponent shuffles 6 inches to the side, they can see a couple of my models, and so they can shoot, right? Well, the difference between a 6-inch move and a 3-inch move when it comes to like getting angles on line of sight is absolutely huge.
Yes.
So I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm just kind of like, I think there's fast, there's slow, and there's slow AF.
But I think you just lump that as slow.
You can do if you want, but I'm
No,
just thinking that
but I think God is into details, and I know exactly what you're saying, Tom. I agree with you. Like something being movement 4 or something. Well, I don't think there's anything movement 4. Something being movement 6, which is fairly slow, versus something that's movement 10. For instance, I think Dragoons for Drakari, not for Drakari, for Adeptus
Admech.
Mechanicus, Admech, I think they're actually only movement 10, and I was always super pissed about that. I was like, this is actually slow as fuck.
Yeah,
Comparison.
it's like Paladins being 5-inch move, and you're like, fucking hell, I could do that 1 inch.
Yeah, which is why I think 10 inches in 40k, when you can shoot 48 inches and you're a 10-inch melee damage dealer, 10 inches is as slow as 6 inches in my opinion. Like it doesn't seem to, like the variance is.
Oh, when you're a melee
wide
damage
enough.
dealer, there's definitely a peel off. Yeah, it's 100%. I'm just thinking L's and walls and shit.
K-Dread in the chat, by the way, who he said, who I think is Keith.
Oh, mate.
Keith, I didn't
I've
know
got
you
a
were
great
K-Dread.
example of this. So I was playing at Hermanistas tournament in Wrexham,
Yeah.
And in my first game, I played against this guy, and he had a Shadow Sword. And a Shadow Sword is a massive Super Heavy Imperial Guard tank. And he parked it sideways, and every turn he was moving it 6 inches backwards or forwards so he'd get line of sight on something, because this massive model was always able to draw range on something. It was absolutely glorious. So it's a slow model, though, right? It's relatively slow because you've got to get around all the terrain, but because of its massive girth, it was still absolutely fine.
Yeah, sometimes it's not the size of the boat; it is the motion of the ocean.
It is, yeah.
But that's a whole different kettle of fish, right? So one of the things we were talking about there. Let's just define this. I think there's either low mobility, yeah, or there is high mobility, and it's just as polarizing as that. And I would lump pretty much everything below low, everything 80 to 90. No, not 80, because there's planes and everything else. Like, I don't know, 70% of things into low mobility straight off the bat.
Yeah.
With really, because what you're talking about is, do you want mobility to be its role, or is mobility a factor? And I think something moving an extra 4 inches in 40k isn't actually as impactful as something moving an extra 24 inches. Like,
Shining space.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nick, what do you think?
What about under 12 inches? Anything that's under 12 is low.
I'm down for that. I agree with that.
Because I think like stuff like jump infantry, like I know you don't see like Blood Angel Assault Marines, they're about moving 12, and I would say they're highly mobile, but they generally will be mobile, like get across the board via deep strike rather than like necessarily moving there.
Yeah, would you describe
range.
deep striking units as mobile, or like? Because I think that's a different conversation we can come back to. But before we got into mobility, we were talking about range. And do you think that there is just long, medium, short range? Or do you think there's long and short?
I think you can categorize.
I think we need
medium. Medium's fine.
Yeah, I think
like 24 to 36 inches is medium. Anything below it is short. Everything above it is long.
What's actually your distinction of where does long range start and where does the gap between medium and long range?
Long range starts at 37 inches.
37?
Yeah, because it doesn't include 36. Just anything above 36 is a long range.
Why specifically that number?
Because 36 allows your opponent lots of space at the back of the board to hide their stuff, whereas anything above that doesn't really, specifically because you've got a 6-inch movement. So let's say I've got a 42-inch range. I can theoretically hit any point of the board if I'm stood in the middle of the board.
Yes. Okay. So really good points. So 37 inches plus.
Plus, yeah.
37
and then
inches.
23 and lower is short. Do you guys agree with that, or?
I don't disagree with it.
Yeah.
I don't have any.
You don't really.
I also don't disagree.
I think 24 inches feels a lot shorter in 40k than.
Oh yeah.
Like it's like that's like basically anything in the world can fucking hit me now. I mean, in a game where planes can move one side of the board to t'other, like does it really matter? So low is below 23 inches. Okay, I'm just writing this down for myself while we do it, and then medium is anything in between. Medium is between. All right, we're doing pretty well. Medium in between.
I'm taking notes, by the way, Rob.
Oh, cheers.
I'm not.
So.
You guys are doing all the work. I'm just sat here.
Right. So obviously, we don't think we need to come up with anything particularly smart when we're talking about melee or like range damage. Like I'm not taking a smasher gun for melee damage. I'm taking it for range damage. So like, that's fine. Like, do you know what I mean? I don't think you need to predefine that or talk about something's purpose. Like, you had a really interesting point though, Tom, when talking about roles of units, when you talked about one of the demon engines, right?
Yeah. So we were talking about the Defiler yesterday when we were having a quick chat about preparing for this subject. And the Defiler is one of those units where it's okay at shooting, it's okay at melee, and it's pretty durable, right? So, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck there. The problem is, if I'm wanting to take a unit that's good at one thing, I am now paying a premium for a bunch of other shit I don't want. So let's say I want a good shooting platform in the back of my Chaos Army. Okay, I could take a Defiler. Defiler, it's got good shooting, right? Yeah, but the amount of extra points I'm paying for melee that I'm never going to use, durability that's nice, but I'm a massive fuck off demon engine that's going to be shot at by everything as soon as anyone can get range on it, and then it kills it, and it's expensive. I might as well go for something cheaper that does the specific job I want better for its points from Midfiler.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I think so. Like that's an example of something having like a multi-role, but you don't want it to have a multi-role. And I'm not saying I'm not saying everything.
Master of none.
Yes, and I'm not saying you have to have something perform all roles. Like a Defiler might genuinely be just a great piece to have because it has that. It has the utility to do all things.
But I don't think that's how the game looks. So let's say if I'm building an army and I say, okay, I want a unit to do this one thing. I don't want a unit, but I'm paying points for things that I'm not ever going to use. I'm trying to think of a good example.
Orcs, don't worry about it. Orcs, just take all the fucking guns. Like Orc boys, take the fucking pistol shots off them. I don't want them. Do you know what I mean?
Okay,
like if that makes them a point cheaper.
Let's say I want a family car. Okay. I don't go out and buy a big expensive van because it's got lots of space in it.
Yes. Correct. Oh, well, it depends. Are we also running some sort of cash and carry booze company? Because I'm in. Because I'm in.
Yeah.
Also, yeah. And also, does it have three wheels? Exactly. And are we the Trotters Independent Traders? Because I'm in.
Oh, that's my family car, and it's a van with the windows blacked out. It's like, yeah, okay, but the police are seizing that. I'm sorry. It's not
that van is actually my cruising pleasure vehicle. I think you'll find.
Cruising pleasure vehicle. I've actually seen one of these vans in Greece, man. It wasn't good. But you understand the point I'm making, though, right? If you're looking for something to do a job for you, you don't like. Let's say I want someone to come and, I'm looking to hire like a teacher, for example. And I've got this person who's exactly qualified for the job, can do it perfectly. But there's also this other guy or girl who is exactly qualified for the job, but also has a bunch of degrees in something I have no use for and wants an extra £20,000 to do it. Yeah. You don't take that option, you take the other one because it's more efficient for what you want doing.
Yeah, I mean, a classic example is round peg, square hole. But then I suppose it's maybe that's not quite the same. Anyway, okay, I like that's when we're talking about roles for units. What's up, Canhammer Darren? So if you've just joined us live, the conversation
about the police.
the conversation that we're having is we're trying to, when we do reviews for units, because we'd like to review more units in the future, and when we do review units, we'd like to talk about it in better ways. I know podcast listeners are like, I already know this, dickhead, but I'm just going to tell everyone who's new here. The whole idea is that we're talking about some of the ways that we might talk about that a little bit better, because we haven't really ever had that conversation between ourselves. So. Anyway, so that's where we're at. We've talked about units being damage dealers and there being either anti-heavy, anti-medium, anti-light, and then ranges being high, above 37 inches for long range. Medium is between 23 and 36 inches, and anything 23 inches below is low, and anything 12 inches or below mobility is low mobility, which sounds wild. 12 inches sounds like it's quite far, but I don't think that's the case. Now, I guess the other thing to talk about is one of the things, the exact opposite of damage dealers are defensive units, and I'm not talking about defensive traits. I'm not talking about the fact that because that's not a role, that's just a bonus element, like a damage dealing unit. I've taken a Dreadnought because he's going to kick out fucking tons of shots. Awesome. But he's also super survivable, which means he can kick out more damage, yes, but he's not taken because of his survivability. He is, but his role is to do the output, right? Whereas a block of 30 Plague Bearers, are specifically taken in as a role to sit on an objective and just fucking eat shit. That's their job.
Block shit off the board, yeah.
Yeah, block shit and eat shit.
Yeah, and like to have loads of psychics behind smiting away. Yeah. So that's a very specific role for Plague Bearers to do.
Which again falls into the role of blocking shit though, right? As does the durability thing, because if you're durable, you get to spend more time blocking with shit.
Do you think blockers is a good term?
Yeah.
Because
we can put it to the list,
or we can just talk screen, because it's a term everybody already understands, and it's effectively what's happening. You're screening off areas of the board, you're screening off objectives, you're screening off characters.
But is blocking and screening different things? Because
screening
could be, you're stopping combat coming in, to tag your tanks, or you're screening off deep striking zones for your Blood Angels coming in or whatever. But blocking, I feel like the definition of a blocker that we just talked about is different to screening. So it's kind of similar.
Yeah, no, I get you. The question then is, does it matter what the intent is of doing that job to the categorization? Because you're effectively doing the same thing for different reasons. Or am I misinterpreting you?
Say that one more time.
So when the cuss is saying you're screening off like different things from being charged or what have you, and what I'm asserting, because I think I understand it, but I could be wrong, is that you're effectively doing the same thing with the unit, but you're doing it for different reasons. So does that mean that we need different categories for that? So are this unit screening or are this units blocking? That's entirely possible. Like
I think the role of screening and the role of blocking are different. I think the role that 30 plague bearers play in an army designed to sit on an objective is different to 10 guardsmen at the front of a line stopping something coming in. Like I think that blocking and screening are different, like, intents. Like I've written a list with some guardsmen in. Their use to me in this particular matchup that I currently have right now is to screen. But
is that not low value screen versus high quality screen? So like a guardsman unit is designed to be temporary. If you screen a unit of guardsmen out, you're handshaking, but it's probably going to die very, very quickly. Whereas if you're spending a bunch of points on plague bearers, your expectation is that unit of plague bearers is going to take a lot of shit first. And the fact that we've got this discussion about it shows that there is a differentiation, so we can call it two different things, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. And it's but I'm trying to stay focused on the purpose of creating roles for people or creating roles for units, as much as units will, and again, as much as you guys at home will be saying, units do sometimes cross over or several roles at once.
And I think I can just foresee some confusion at home. For example, if we say, "Oh, this unit's blocking," or "This unit's screening," then people at home are like, "Well, what's the difference?"
Yeah,
well,
go on.
I think the difference comes into, like, I think from my point of view, it's useful to find the roles of units, but then the next bit is defining how they work in a list.
Yeah.
So you might have, because if you talk about a list, if you go into a tournament, you talk about a list, you go, oh, these are the units he's got on that list, and in this particular list, this unit looks like it's going to be a screen. Yes. Or in this particular list, it looks like it's going to be a blocker, and then that's why I think the definition between the two is useful, because if you just say, "Oh, those plague bearers are a screen," that might give someone a different idea of how it's going to be used.
No, I totally
get
you.
For psychers.
My assertion was that it's just the same thing, but with that you're doing it for different reasons. But if you want to explain what the reasons are behind it using the terminology, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I actually think I think screening is a use and blocking is a role. I think screening is something that you do in-game. Like, you make the choice to screen with... It doesn't matter which unit you choose, whether it be plague bearers or the guardsmen, right? You turn up to the tabletop and you decide you're going to screen, which is a job that you're going to do with a unit, but you write 30 plague bearers into your army list to do blocking.
Yeah.
Like, because...
And screening is a form of blocking.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's like it's the act of doing so, as opposed to
screening is the act of blocking with the intent to protect. I think.
Yeah, exactly.
That would make sense.
I don't know. That sounds. So actually, I would say that only blocking is the actual. Blocking's the role that, because really you're asking yourself, like, when you're talking about those 10 guardsmen. Really good point about those 10 guardsmen. If you're talking about the loyal 32, you're actually their role is nothing to do on the tabletop. Yeah, they can do some screening and they can do some fucking shots or whatever, but their role is to generate CP. That's the only reason they're in the list. That's really the only reason they're on. No one's ever gone, do you know what? No one's ever written a mix list and gone, yeah, do you know what? Like, I know I get the bonus CP, but the reason I really want them is I want 30 wounds with a 5-up save. Like, that's what I really want. Like, that's what my list is missing, because I feel like you could find a better version of that. I feel like you can find 30 bodies somewhere to do something, but I think what they definitely are used for is the CP. So I think it's disingenuous sometimes to say, I've written 30 guys in as a screen. You've written 32 guys in for CP. But, yeah.
Well, you might sometimes write them in specifically as a screen if you're playing like the anti-meta game, like if let's say Blood Angels were the meta and everyone was using them, you might specifically put 30 Guardsmen in to be a screen for blocking out Deep Strike. So that might be a reason why you put stuff like that in.
Yeah. But so board space. Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Does blocking also involve? This is where we get to talk about the Orc boys variants, right? You've got Orc boys who are you've got 30 of them in the list. The rest of your list is shooting, and all those 30 boys is to just fling at your opponent with Warpath on and just mulch something. The rest of your list is shooting. Or the counter to that is.
Would that make him countercharge?
Or they're in your army. We could also add that in as well. Although maybe I think that's more of a use. I think you can define things maybe as use and role.
But you can still take something because you want countercharge. For example, I've got a really actually good case study on this. When I went to the 2018 Six Nations, that was in Cork. We were playing with Simon Weekly, and Simon was playing Orcs, and this was the infamous original Crystal Mat Gun incident. And what he had 18 Crystal Mat Guns. Mm-hmm. And behind them, this was before the rule of three, he just spammed Weird Boys. And the reason for this was he'd put the Weird Boys in his list specifically so that if anything ran up to the Met Guns, he would just smite with all the Weird Boys and kill everything, including the Weird Boys. But he had put those in his list specifically for the role of counter hitting. So I do think you can definitely take it as a role and then you use it in that way, because that's what a role is. You take it to do a thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I'm glad you've made the point. The same way I want a smashy orc, smash captain orc, or I think countercharge is the best example, because I want something that's in my gun line that can definitely make something fuck off. Like
we call that the player.
So hold on, let me just. So countercharging is a role. Which I think is a good point.
I think that's a good one, because before this terrible business started, I was if I was picking my orcs up again, I was going to have an orc biker boss on a bike specifically for the countercharge role.
Yeah, same thing. I think the orc. It depends on what you're running, but the orc gun line needs something to make everything leave, because the boys can't effectively indefinitely do that.
You can't even guarantee you're going to kill things, because there's so many instances where you're reliant upon like RNG. So when I played Colm McCarthy, who is now a Scottish captain at Dark Millennium with the Crystal Met Guns again, he was playing 9 Talos, and I didn't kill a single one with all 18 Met Guns in 3 turns.
Yes.
So I had to make it go away. So it still causes issues. Like, you need that in your army sometimes.
I'm just reading something Rambo Squirrel's writing in the chat, because he's putting some really good stuff in there. Just to throw a spanner in the works. Oh, no, wait. So example, cover home objectives, far objectives, kill X-type. Then you can say how good they are in that role due to the abilities they have.
Aggressive blockers, for example. So some blockers you just stick in your backfield to make sure things don't deep straight behind you. Certain blockers you can push up and just like say, well, deal with this, it's going to take you a while. Like Plague Bearers again. Plague Bearers are something you can walk into the center of the board and just say, come on, kill all of these, because I'm not going to waste my time sticking these in the backfield, because you're not going to shoot them anyway because of range. I'm going to walk them at you, and now you've got to deal with it, because they're just blocking so much of the board off. Similar with Storm Boys. How?
Well, yeah, but a good point there, which I think you've brought up, is the difference between aggressive, because aggressive blocking and defensive blocking, because I think that's actually a really nice way to describe it, because we talked about this a bit yesterday. Actually, when you take a fucking 90 Storm Boys and you throw them in your opponent's face,
in the corner.
Yeah, but that's aggressive blocking.
Yeah, 100%.
Whereas the Plague Bearer build is defensive blocking. And that's what, and that's a nice way of looking at it. You're doing the same job, yeah. You're putting a bunch of fucking dudes somewhere, right? But you're doing it in different ways. You're attacking in one way, and then you're defending in the other way. But you're still doing the same job, ish.
You're defending the amount of board space you have. Sometimes you do that by just lobbing your opponent and say, right, you get 10% of the board, and I'm going to have the other 90. And then sometimes you're like fucking Seto Kaiba saying, I'm going to have 51% of the board, and therefore I'm going to win off that 2% difference.
Also, I can just say a big shout out to Donaldinho for subscribing. He says, "Oh my god, the 40k hosts, my 3 favorite Honest Wargamer hosts," which is not true. He actually rated earlier on. He rated. I want you to know that earlier on today he rated the show hosts as Nathan, Jonathan, the 40k guys. Didn't even say your names. Then
We just
then,
want
He doesn't know.
ambiguous
It's
blogger
okay.
at this
He
point.
doesn't know our names because Rob doesn't spell them right on the overlay.
I've smashed it today.
You
All there.
have smashed it today. You didn't even attempt Nikos' surname though.
Whatever. And then anyway.
To be fair, I think I'd rate them in that order as well.
All right.
It's my
Well,
favourites.
Yeah,
fuck.
it's unanimous.
What about Dan Sway? He should be in there as well. He's also great. Yeah.
Is he the Aussie man?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's good.
He's great. Then Guest, then Rob, then Speckles right at the bottom.
Poor Speckles. He can't even win that.
Okay, so another role is
Speckles
count.
the MVP of Dragon Slayers. Thank you.
So we haven't talked. We've talked about being anti-heavy, medium, and light. But I guess you could be a heavy anti-heavy. Like you could be so a Dorado is so for classification, and I guess really it comes down to interpretation as to whether or not something is heavy. Like heavy infantry would be custodes, but heavy vehicles, like I guess, or like I don't know. Are you heavy? Are you light?
So,
like
example of this.
what's a Gretchen?
What was-
Light.
You know how a couple of months ago, like, it was about a year ago actually. I must have been. What's that massive knight that we were talking about? You could give it Crast and the headsman's mark, and it would just blow up overnight. Is it a Porphyrion?
Porphyrion?
That's a heavy.
It is a heavy.
That's a good
but,
example. There
but
you
does it
go.
really?
You
Like,
never see it because Forge World, but you know.
But does it matter? Isn't it just like?
No, but that's just an example of heavy, right?
Yeah, but is it light? I think we shouldn't go that far. I think just heavy, medium, light is fine for what things are.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
problematically, I guess heavy infantry is really what you want. But if I say that it's heavy on a Custodes versus light on a Gretchen, if you're thinking that I'm comparing a Custode to a Dreadnought, then you are like, I can't help you. Probably.
Well, we can't, we can't think about those people. Not first.
Yeah, okay, good. Nick,
I
Rambo
just saw
Score
that.
just said something in the chat. Do you want to read it out? Because I think that's a good point. Rambo Score said something in the chat. Do you want to?
Oh yeah, he said you haven't spelt my last name right because it's just Nikos.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, but
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Have you got that on the soundboard? Oh, he does! I didn't even know he did. I didn't even know.
Oh, that's my favorite. I think my favorite one is this. Is I'm going to make some jokes and just be like,
That won't be your favourite one when you start adding the Nathan clips on the soundboard.
yeah, that'd be the future. Can't wait for that. Yeah, sharper bullets. Have they got sharper bullets, Rob? Yeah, that'll be that's the one. Okay, so some things to talk about now. So obviously classifications of light, heavy, and medium for the units themselves. So like we've now got, if we wanted to talk about a unit, we could describe it as a light anti-heavy. So a group of infantry with las cannons, as an example, with low mobility or high mobility, but more than likely low mobility. I think that's a way of describing a unit, like truthfully. Yeah. But then we need to talk about roles, because we've started to talk about that a little bit, right? We've talked about blocking, aggressive and defensive blocking, and we've talked about, and I guess this is where we come back to damage dealer, because it's true that a unit is anti-heavy, but its role surely is still being a damage dealer. Like, it's good that it, damage dealer is the term, it is because it's in my list to do damage. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? So the role is still surely just damage dealer. It doesn't matter that we've clarified that it's anti-heavy damage.
In its essence, it is, yes. But I do think it's useful to clarify further.
Yeah. Have you got any thoughts on that, Tom, or not? Because
not
the role
really.
is still damage dealing, right?
There's always more information you can talk about units, right? So I feel like we could always go down the rabbit hole of, well, this is this classification, and we could just do constant classifications. Or we can provide an overview whereby people can understand what you can expect to see from this unit, how it operates, how it's going to work within this list, and what its role might be. And then you can go a bit more into depth with how they're actually using it in the game and explain why it's happening like that, rather than just saying, this is a thing.
Yes, I agree with you, which is why we're going through this. But it's why I think
Yeah,
that
100%.
as much as it seems like a little disingenuous, I think the role of damage dealer is genuinely a role. Like you take 10 Hellblasters, not that you do ever take 10 Hellblasters, but you take 10 Hellblasters as a damage dealing unit. You don't do it for fucking any other reason. Like they're there to kick out the damage. Like because otherwise, if you wanted to have blocking, you would have intercessors maybe, but their job is to do a thing. So they're in the list. Their role is primarily X, and probably 95% of things are in a list to do that. Maybe like surely it's either like damage dealing, support, blocking, which seems like a quite unique role. Actually, blocking as a unit or as a role that you would use it, and then so support being everything. Like you could do psychic support or aura
like,
support.
would you class? Yeah, would you? I was just thinking like characters can be either like a smash captain. They might be in the damage dealer section, but then also in a lot of my chaos lists, like I took sort of a year or so ago, I had lots of cheap characters, and all they were was either to fill the HQ slot for a battalion, or to do the aura for reroll ones to hit, or something like that. So could you clarify and class all of those characters in a role of a support? Because they make the rest of your army better. They allow your damage dealers to do the damage more efficiently and better. So could you clarify it as a support, or is there a different better word for that to encompass that kind of role?
I think support's the right word, isn't it? Like they're there to provide buffs. Like, but buff piece is always just like, oh, how do you mean? Like, and also sometimes people like they like if you look at Gulliman, for instance, he's a damage dealer who is also like his role. But you probably don't take Gulliman. Again, that's why it's a really good way of describing a unit, because you look at him and you think he can do really great damage, but I am not taking him as a damage dealer. I'm probably taking him as a countercharge buff piece.
Exactly, which is why I think Calgar is better than Gulliman right now. And that's why I made the argument a few months ago, because it's the same thing but better.
Yeah, so support piece, I think, is a great way of describing it, because he's actually a countercharging support piece. And already through this conversation, I feel like we're having a better conversation about the units that we need to talk about and how we quantify them to the audience, if anyone even gives a shit. But I like to think that people give a shit. Let us know if you think it's a good conversation. I'd be interested. Do you think that there's a better way of saying support, Tom? Twitch chat, what do you think?
No, I think that's great. Like, I've been playing a lot of Football Manager recently, and a lot of it is based on just units supporting everything else, and that's why I like to talk about the pivot, because the pivot is often like the unit and the linchpin that allows you to then win the game. For example, a good example of that is Dark Reapers back in like 2017, 2018, right? Where that'll be the unit just doing all the damage, and everything else was built around just protecting them, and that's why the Hive Tyrant spam list was so good, because it could get through all that and then beat up the Dark Reapers, because it was able to get at the linchpin. And then everything. So, and this is the case with a lot of list building, right? So, even with Plague Bearer list, let's say, the linchpin was characters that was allowing you to buff all of those Plague Bearers up and just walk across the board and then do the damage when things arrive. You can get at the characters, the list falls apart. The pivot is effectively what if I kill this, what makes the list just completely ineffective. I mean, everything else that isn't that is built around making that, like, enabling that as much as possible. Sometimes
but then are they all support units? Because I think Poker John in the chat's put buff and debuff. Like, is it better to call
sometimes that's
buff characters or debuff characters?
Well, sometimes that list is synergistic. So a good example, let's say, is Iron Hands, where you have the intercessor spam. Okay, the intercessors are carrying you, but that's like most of the army, right? And then everything else is supporting the intercessors, and the intercessors supporting them. So that's like an internally synergistic army, where it's just like, well, what am I really going to get at here? If it's really going to cause an issue, well, I'll just kill it, and then maybe that works.
Would you say that, like, I'm struggling to think of one. Can you think of a unit that is actually a debuff unit? And what I mean by that is, it's like, for instance, with Tyranids, you can have, is it the Neuranthrope that can make things -1 to hit? Yeah, within range. Yeah,
but equally, if you lose that doesn't cost you the game, because that's not the thing that's actively just annoying your opponent.
No, but it's also, I wouldn't also describe it as a debuff unit. It does create a debuff generally, like, and it's
Which
also
makes your unit stronger.
Yeah, but it makes your unit stronger, so it's really just supporting your unit. I know
Brilliant,
that's
yeah.
like I know earlier on I was asking for clarity, but I think the problem is when you break down support units, they can become like they can become really diverse. But truthfully, all they do is they like, especially if their role is support. If their role, a la Gulliman, is to just give rerolls around it and countercharge, then it doesn't matter like what support he's doing. Well, that's anyway. I think that's
So
right.
I think the way I like to see it as is, if I take this unit out of my army, will the army still work? And with the case of the Neurophrobe, the answer is probably yes, it'll just be a bit more shit. And
Yes.
that's why it's a support piece and not the pivot of a linchpin.
Well, no, because now you're just saying like I know what it is you're saying.
No,
like,
well, what do you think I'm saying then? Because I can't respond to something if you don't explain.
yeah, okay. So what I think you're getting here is like there's this one unit in the game that everything else is really there to protect because it's going to carry you through the game. The carry.
Well, I've already made the example of the intercessors where that's not necessarily the case, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, good. All right, it was sweet because I don't want everything to just be a support
No,
unit
of course,
other than
it's
one
not.
strong
And,
unit.
there's just one kind of list archetype that you can then explain, because not all lists are the same in terms of what roles they need to achieve. You
Great
don't always
point.
need the same support, and that's why you can differentiate with these terms of the lists.
Yeah, that's also a really, really good point as well. I'm very excited. I know Nick was talking about it yesterday. I'm super excited to define list archetypes.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be really fun. So Frank in the chat is saying, "Don't worry, Grots carry so much on their tiny little backs." That's true. So another role is a support unit. So far we've got damage, support, countercharge, and blocking. I'd be interested to know if there is anything else that you think that is a role that doesn't fit into those. Something you can think of that you've taken in a list that does a job.
What was the list, sorry, again? I might have missed a couple.
Okay, so support units, damage dealing units, blocking units, damage dealing units, blocking units, support units, countercharge units is what we currently have.
Can we even stick countercharge units in with the supports?
No, I think
Okay.
it's a role in its own. Like character sniping,
Yeah, because,
it's damage dealing.
because a character can just sit behind your line waiting for the time to go and strike. It might not necessarily be supporting anything during those turns.
No, of course.
But then its role,
equally-
it fulfills that role when
No, I
it does
get
the
that.
counter charge.
But equally, you could be playing a Neurophrobe into something like another melee army where it doesn't actually do anything unless something achieves something, right?
Yeah, but it's not. In that case, it's not a countercharge. Maybe like we
Does,
later on.
does a support
we-
unit always need to be providing the buff that it provides for it to be a support unit?
No, you need to have written it in your list to provide a support. In your best case scenario.
Yeah, no,
like,
I get that. It's just not worth. It's not worth arguing with. Carry on. It's fine.
Okay, good. Well, the next thing that I need to talk about is character sniping. Like, because I actually think that that's a role in of itself. I know it's damage dealing. And
But
it's
it's a
getting
very
stuff.
specific type.
It's a very specific type of damage dealing. So much so that actually finding it in your list or putting it into your list is actually quite important, right?
Yeah, and I think I mean, depending on the army that you take, you don't always have. I mean, most armies have some options for it, but some armies obviously do it better than others. And I don't always necessarily think about specifically killing characters in my list, because I think you can only design a list to do so much, and I don't always necessarily think that anti-characters is on the top of my list.
Things
Yeah.
that you want.
But it is something you could like obviously the classic example of that is like your Vindica Assassin or Sniper models. But then I think another example of it is what I used in my Chaos list recently is, lots of Thousand Sun Sorcerers who have spells that can target units,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
like a Smite, which is the closest.
So I agree with Nikos in this one. That comes back to what I was saying earlier about how I personally like to design my lists, because I don't like to say, well, I put this unit in here for killing tanks, and I put this unit in here for killing infantry, and I put this unit in here for killing characters, because I like to build towards near an extreme and then use that extreme to just like roll over other armies. However, I do think that some people often do end up doing that with their list. Whether or not I agree with it doesn't really matter. So long as people do it, then I think we need to be able to talk about it, even if we disagree with it, right? Because let's say we have a game on stream, and this person's like, someone's saying, oh well, I've got my army and I've spent 85 points or 95 points now on a Vindicare assassin. I was like, why have you done that? Well, how do we categorize that if we don't categorize it as character suppression?
Character suppression is good. I like that, because actually
I don't think it's just about killing either.
Yeah, because I think that's actually a better way of describing it, because it's not necessarily...
Because it can just make characters hide if you have
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, spot on.
Yeah, or they can't just stand there with their dick in the wind being like, haha, buffs for everyone. They have to be a little bit more. So that's really good. Yeah, character suppression is a really nice description, I think, for a role. And I think sometimes you do look for that. Like, currently, there's nothing in the meta that I want that is so important that character suppression, like you say, Nick, is at the top of my game. I don't think to myself, I can't, or the characters that are available are so tanky that I can't really afford to put enough units in. I wouldn't mind seeing a faction or a sub-faction somewhere just being like this is the character kicking list. Whether or not that works well into other matchups, which is one of the things we're going to talk about later, I still think it's a unique dynamic, I think. So any other roles that you that you think of, or things that you have? Like, high mobility is a role, but do you think about something that needs to get across the board? High mobility is a stat, isn't it? But do you think about something that needs to get over, or do you just think about projecting power, to steal my friend Tom's term, which is, a long-range shooting unit is projecting power as well as a high mobility unit that's going to go into combat. So you're doing the same thing. You're going from point A to point B, and you're delivering some sort of payload. So I wouldn't say that I think of things going out there as a role very much. I do like to have mobility in my list, but I don't think about the role of doing X.
So can I ask a quick question? Because
Yeah.
I'm trying to work out where this would fit, because you've just prompted an idea. When I played at Blood and Glory, I had one unit of Shining Spears.
Yeah.
And the role of that unit of Shining Spears was to fly across the board and just kill one thing that scared my Dark Reapers.
Yes.
What role would that fit into?
Damage dealer. Because your job, like you said, the job that you had them for was to go and destroy the unit.
So can we break that down to subcategories? Because some damage dealers, for example, the Reapers, are also your pivot, right? So you're building around that pivot, and then that's carrying the game for you. The Shining Spears are doing it with the intention of you are trading and you are handshaking that they're going to die.
I think that is like a nuance to it that doesn't need.
No, but so
to be
screening and
expressed.
blocking.
I think screening and blocking are
It's the same thing with different intentions, and that's why we needed the different categorization. So, do we need the same thing for this as well? If not, that's fine. But I just
so aggressive damage dealers and defensive damage dealers. So
or kamikaze or trading damage dealers and protected damage dealers, or potentially. Like I haven't.
I think I know what you're getting at, Tom. Your Dark Reapers, you can. In your playstyle, you can almost guarantee that they're going to stay alive and do damage.
Or you
game.
have to, yes.
You keep them alive, and then some, they're going to die. Like an example I can think of from my chaos list when I was running Khorne Berserkers, when I'd put them in a Rhino, get out, run, warp time, run, and then charge. I'm sending them across the board to go and do a load of damage, but I know that they're going to die.
Yeah.
A cool name that I think could work for this is a grenade unit.
Yeah, there you go. I love that.
Because you lob a grenade, you just take the pin out, throw it, it does its damage, but it's gone. It's a waste of resource.
I was going to call it like reliable and one-hit wonders, because reliable means that you're going to do it for the entire game. One-hit wonders means you're doing it once. But I like yours better. Grenade is cool.
Grenade is cool, but then what would you do? What's the opposite of a grenade? The problem is that that's a little bit X-wingy, that's a grenade unit. It's like, what the fuck do they mean by that?
But we need to draw a line somewhere then.
No. We don't, it's not a serious thing, because it's not. We're not solving the rubric now. We're just talking out loud.
Yeah. No, I get you. And I'm not saying that we have to do it now, but I'm just conscious of, obviously you were talking about X-wing and not being accessible. We need to decide what's too much and what's about
No, grenade makes sense though.
No, it
Being
does.
used like a
100%.
grenade.
Yeah. It just
You
up for
you could just easily term it like a throwaway damage dealer,
yeah.
or a consistent damage dealer.
Yeah.
Well, like, so the Datcom, hey, big up to Datcom in the chat, says glass cannons. But the thing about glass cannons is because I feel that really that describes their fragility as opposed to anything else. Whereas there are some examples of grenades, if you will, specifically the Combat Knight that runs across the board. Yeah,
Even
like
Shining Spears as well with a 2+ vulnerable save.
Right, that's actually not that like
Squishy.
So they're not really glass cannons. Like, if another 2,000 points focuses them down, then probably they go down. But I'm sure, Tom, you've had some games where they've actually gone through unit after unit, right?
Oh, yeah. I've had games where I've lost my Dark Reapers and suddenly I had to shoehorn my Shining Spears into a reliable damage roll.
Right.
Because they can do that too, but that's not what I'm choosing to use them as in most of my games. So, for example, if we're watching a matchup, let's say we're watching me playing my Shining Spears at Blood and Glory, and I'm like, okay, in this matchup, he's going to trade his Shining Spears, and they're going to go off and be a grenade unit.
Yeah.
But game 4. But in this game 3, his Dark Reapers are very vulnerable, so he's going to trade his Dark Reapers, and now the Shining Spears become a reliable damage dealer.
Yeah, but either way, yes, I agree with you. So damage dealer top level, and then maybe to subcategorize.
It's just subcategories. Yeah.
More the application of the damage dealer. Like aggressive and defensive blocking is you write the list. The Storm Boys are going to go do aggressive blocking. Yeah, the Plague Bearers are going to go do defensive blocking, but they can still also screen. Yeah, like as a role, and they can control board space and grab objectives. So there's a whole bunch of things. Oh, Datcom, thanks for subscribing. Also missed you, you gangster. Is my list done yet? Says Jonathan Atlands.
Well, I watched the show earlier. I was thinking after we've done this, like the next rundown I do, I could do it as Jonathan Atland's Black Legion list. Like come up with a list and try and use this kind of terminology.
Oh, you know what we should do?
Yeah.
We should have a King of the Hill where we all turn up with Black Legion lists and Jonathan votes on his favourite.
Yeah, deal. And we'll have him on. Jonathan, if he agrees, come on next Thursday and be the judge and jury of the... but we weren't going to do that next Thursday. We could move that to next Thursday, move the team thing to the week after.
Yeah,
that's fine. My grots do aggressive blocking, and that's why I always lose. Says Vitamin D.
Hey, no, but that can actually work. That can actually work. I made Scrivo do it, and it worked wonders.
Okay, all right. So let me just write that down. So damage dealer, we've got grenade, but we don't have a term for what you used your your Dark Reapers for.
Oh, the reliable damage dealer. Yeah. So we were talking about this actually yesterday with the Thunderfire Cannon, where they were very efficient because you got to shoot them for 6 turns.
Mm-hmm.
But what do we call that?
I just see its role is dealing damage, right? Like I like that's why it's in the list. It just does that thing. Like,
and it does it every turn though as well.
And it does it every turn. I think we could try to find a way to describe it. Like I guess really when we do a review for a unit, which is again the point of the show today, is we just say, look, looking at this data sheet and everything that you can do inside of the book, I would describe this unit as its role for me is always a damage dealer, and it does that in these ways. And here are the uses, but its role in my list is X. And sometimes it's both, right? Storm Boys do aggressive
DPT,
blocking.
That might be shit, but we could go DPT, like
what do you mean?
damage per turn. Like you've got DPS, which is like consistent damage in like a MOBA. There's DPT is consistent damage over turns.
Yeah, that's cool.
I don't know. That might be a bit inaccessible though because it's an acronym again. We've already got DPR. DPT is like okay.
So Scriver says you pick them for the lack of needle line of sight, which I agree with. That's how they do damage well, but their job still
that's why they're reliable.
Yeah, but the point is that anyway. Well, we're labouring the point. You get bonus points for summoning points, but isn't mandatory. Okay, John, appreciate that.
Yeah, you're not getting 70 points, John. Sorry.
Right. So we're still on rolls. We're still on rolls for a minute. Character suppression. Do you think that there's anything to say for being an objective holder? Or not, or if we're talking about ITC specifically, or maybe even WTC when it comes to those the cards, do you think there's anything to to say about like something that achieves a mission. A good example would be engineers from ITC.
Yeah. There you go.
Like mission specific unit, which it can't be that
Yeah,
because
but
that's
think,
MSU.
I think that's the only. I was just thinking then, like, have I ever written a list and thought, right, this is my unit that's going to be holding the objectives? And I think the only time I've really done that is for ITC and the engineers secondary mission. I don't think in any, like, in most lists, it's almost assumed that I'll have lots of troops because I'm bringing a battalion for lots of CP, and I'll just have units on the board, and and the mission's going to change anyway. I'll change how I'm going to score those objectives and jump on those at the time. So I don't necessarily think I, outside that specific example, have objective holder units written into my list as a role anyway.
Spot on. If you're writing a list, you should probably.
Hold on,
write
guys.
100%.
Your internet's being a bit dodge, or probably it's my internet's being a bit dodge, and you guys are coming through a bit crackly. I don't know if everyone could hear that. I'll just hold on while I'm waiting for it to level out. I'll just re-describe the roles to give everyone a bit of a think through. We've got character suppression, support units, we've got damage dealers, and we've got blocking units. Those seems to be the kind of 4 roles that we've. I guess the other role to talk about is CP creation. I guess I don't know.
Farming units.
Yeah, we're still getting some crappy internet, dudes. I'm so sorry. Just give it a minute. Do you want me to sing you a song while we're waiting for it to sort? I got you. Morning has broken like the first morning.
I think we need to do segment intros.
No, it's so fucked. It's so fucked. I might have to call you back. Hold on one moment.
I've got the stream open for the chat and it seems fine.
The audio.
I don't know. Let me check the audio.
No, it's the worst.
DC said the sound's fine.
It's fine for us. Okay, just me then.
Just you.
Okay.
It's fine. Yeah, it's just you.
Yeah. Okay, Rob, we need to use that voice for segment intros.
Super weird.
So what you can do, Rob, is you can assume what we said, and then we can just go with that. Okay.
It's honestly inaudible for me. Hold on.
Are your headphones plugged in properly, mate?
No, it's not my headphones. Oh my god.
You said it was inaudible, but you perfectly understood what I just said.
So sorry, I can't listen to that. It triggers the shit out of me. It sounds worse than this. It's like. It kind of sounds like this, only like a million times worse with static. But thankfully, let's get the crowd involved. Yay! Let's take a small 1 moment break. One more quick talk to see if I can hear it, and if not, I'll call you back on the Skype. Do me a chat, either of you.
Do me a chat.
No,
is that even better?
Oh, I've okay. All right, I've logged out of that. I don't know what was going on there, gents, but I'll rejoin the call and then we'll see if we can get these boys back. There we go. This has never happened before. Why do I have to live this life? Hello? Still doing it. Why? It's such a weird. This is terrible. You can do.